Welcome to the channel. Today, we're exploring some unbelievable story. Stay tuned and let's dive in. It was a warm Friday afternoon and the rhythmic hum of the lawnmower filled the air as I pushed it across the yard. The sun was high and the smell of freshly cut grass mixed with the faint scent of barbecue wafting over from a neighbor's yard. It was one of those days that made me grateful for the little things, our home, our family, and the peace of this simple life. But then, as I made another pass, I saw Sophia dart across the yard like a bolt of lightning, her face flushed and streaked with tears. She didn't even glance my way as she ran inside, slamming the front door behind her so hard it rattled the windows. I shut off the mower, my heart sinking. Something was wrong. Brushing the grass clippings off my hands, I made my way inside, wiping my shoes on the mat before stepping into the house. Rebecca wasn't home. She had taken the car to run some errands. That left me alone to figure out what had upset Sophia so much. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight, and stopped outside her bedroom door. It was shut tight, with no sign of the cheerful, chatty girl who usually filled the house with laughter. "Sophia," I knocked gently, keeping my voice calm. "Sweetheart, it's Dad. Are you okay in there?" "Go away," her voice shot back, muffled but sharp with emotion. "Hey, talk to me. What's wrong?" I tried again, leaning against the door frame. "Did something happen? Was it something I did?" "No," she shouted. "Just leave me alone, Dad." Her words stung, but I could hear the quiver in her voice, the kind that said she was holding back more tears. My instinct was to push, to stay there and make her tell me what was wrong. But I knew better. Sophia wasn't the little girl who used to come running to me with her problems anymore. She was 18 now, caught between being a child and becoming an adult. "All right," I said softly, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. "I'll be downstairs if you need me." "Okay. I'm here, Sophia. Always." We verbally tussled like that for a minute or two. Finally, I said, "Okay, maybe you'd feel more comfortable talking to Mom a little later." She cut me off and pushed me out into the hallway. "No," she screamed, and I heard her locking her door. Very strange. I thought it had to be some boy. I was wrong. Then there was no response, only the faint sound of her sniffling behind the door. I stood there for a moment longer, unsure of what else I could do, then reluctantly, I turned and made my way back down the stairs, my mind swirling with questions. What could have upset her so badly? Was it school? Friends? Something I'd missed entirely? Whatever it was, it wasn't like Sophia to shut me out. Back in the kitchen, I stared out the window at the half-mowed lawn, my chest tight with worry. Some 6 hours later, Rebecca's car rolled into the driveway. Sophia had stayed in her room all day, only coming out for a couple of quick trips to the bathroom. I decided to give her some space, planning to talk to her the following day. As soon as Rebecca shrugged off her coat, I filled her in on Sophia's strange behavior. Rebecca looked puzzled. She mentioned that Sophia had asked to go to the mall after Rebecca had already left for work, but Rebecca hadn't known Sophia had actually gone. When I described where Sophia had been, how she'd returned early, and her emotional state, crying uncontrollably, Rebecca's face turned pale. Two women losing it in the same house. Great, I thought. Daniel. I'll talk to her in the morning. Sounds like girl trouble to me, Rebecca said. You go play golf or something. Okay. Yeah, sure, I agreed, backing down. Rebecca watched as her husband drove away, bracing herself for what she knew would be a difficult confrontation with her daughter. Though she couldn't predict exactly how it would unfold, she knew it wouldn't be easy. She knocked softly on Sophia's door. "Go away," came the sharp reply from within. "Sophia, it's me, Mom," Rebecca called gently. "Leave me alone, you liar," Sophia screamed. Rebecca felt her knees weaken, her worst fears nearly confirmed. Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself. She had already retrieved the spare room key from atop the refrigerator. Slowly and quietly, she inserted it into the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open. Sophia was huddled on the floor in the corner near the window. The bed was still untouched, and she looked utterly distraught, her face tear-streaked from what seemed like hours of crying. "Sophia, what's going on? Why are you acting this way?" Rebecca asked, still clinging to the hope that the situation might not be what she feared. Are you serious? Sophia shot back, rising to her feet and advancing toward her mother. Her voice dripped with anger. You think I didn't see you? Carla saw you. Natalie saw you. We all saw you. Hugging, kissing, acting like a lovesick teenager with that man. Ethan Caldwell, isn't it? Did you know he's named after a criminal and a killer? What? Rebecca stammered, confused. Ethan Caldwell, Mom, like Bonnie and Clyde, the criminals. But that's beside the point. You're having an affair, aren't you? Sophia accused, her voice sharp and unwavering. Rebecca hesitated, caught off guard. He's not. I mean, it's not what you think, she tried, her voice faltering. Don't lie to me. Sophia snapped. We saw you, Mom. How could you do this to Dad? Rebecca's composure broke, and she slapped Sophia across the face, her frustration boiling over. You will not speak to me like that. Sophia staggered back, her expression stunned, though her fury remained. Don't you ever raise your hand to me again, she warned coldly. I'm stronger than you think, and I won't hesitate to defend myself. Rebecca's hands trembled as she nodded, her voice trembling with regret. I'm so sorry, Sophia. I shouldn't have done that. Sophia held up a hand to silence her. Enough. What I want now is the truth. You're going to tell me everything, and then you're going to confess to Dad when he gets home. Rebecca's eyes widened with fear. Sophia, if I tell him, he'll leave me. I know I deserve it, but is that really the best way forward for any of us? You're asking me if honesty is the best way. Sophia said, her voice unwavering. Yes, Mom, it is. Start talking. Rebecca sighed heavily, tears welling up in her eyes. I met Carl at the hospital picnic last year. You were there, and so was your father. I know who he is, Sophia interjected. He's a car salesman. I know his daughter, Hannah. We have classes together. I didn't know you were seeing him behind Dad's back, though. Rebecca's expression turned to surprise. I didn't realize you knew his family. And I didn't realize my mother was betraying my father, Sophia retorted coldly. But here we are. You are seeing him, aren't you? Rebecca began to cry. Yes, I am. He asked me to lunch a few months ago, and your father and I were going through a rough time. I made a terrible mistake. I let him take me to a motel, and we were intimate. You slept with him? Sophia demanded. Say it. Yes, Rebecca admitted softly. I slept with him. How many times? Sophia asked, her voice unwavering. Once a week since then, Rebecca confessed. He tells me I'm beautiful, makes me feel appreciated. Things your father hasn't said to me in a long time. Do you love him? Sophia's voice was sharp and direct. No, Rebecca answered firmly. He's a distraction, nothing more. I've only ever loved your father. Sophia's eyes narrowed, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. Then why didn't you think about him before you started this? What are you going to do now? Do you even have a plan? Rebecca's tears fell freely. I don't know, Sophia. I've made such a mess of everything. You're right about that, Sophia said icily. And you'll need to figure out how to make it right, starting with the truth. I don't know what to say, Sophia, Rebecca murmured, her voice breaking. I was weak. I gave in. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to stop it. Carl even implied that if I didn't keep seeing him, your father, David, would find out. It felt like blackmail. But I'm not making excuses. I made the choice and I'm guilty. I'll do whatever you think is right. Her words dissolved into sobs as she sank to the floor. Sophia stood over her, her expression stern and unyielding, embodying a fierce resolve. This isn't about me, Mom, Sophia said firmly. It's about what Dad is going to do when he finds out. You didn't just betray him. You've damaged this family. Do you understand that? Sophia paced the room, her anger tempered slightly by the sight of her mother's despair. She stopped and softened her tone. You have to confess to him, Mom. No lies, no excuses, no half-truths. If you want, I'll be there with you. But let me ask you, do you even want to stay with Dad? Or is that over too? Of course I want to stay with him, Rebecca cried. But if I confess, I know he'll leave me. I deserve it, but it will tear us apart. I'm terrified, Sophia. I'm sure you are, Sophia said, her voice steady. She sat beside her mother and placed a hand on her shoulder. But you have to tell him everything. The truth, Mom. All of it. Rebecca nodded weakly. One more thing, Sophia said, her tone sharp again. And it has to be the truth. Have there been others? Don't lie to me. Rebecca's sobs deepened and Sophia paled as realization set in. How many? Sophia asked quietly. 2, Rebecca whispered, barely audible. Sophia closed her eyes. Her expression filled with dismay. This is worse than I thought, she said. Dad is going to be devastated. And honestly, Mom, I don't even know what to say to you anymore. Rebecca looked up at her daughter, seeing not just anger but a strength and determination that far exceeded her years. In that moment, Rebecca recognized the formidable woman Sophia was becoming, one who demanded integrity and accountability. I'll tell him, Rebecca said softly. I'll tell him everything. I came home that evening, still thinking about the lawn I hadn't finished mowing. The house was quieter than usual, but I didn't think much of it until I stepped into the kitchen and saw Rebecca waiting for me. She was sitting at the table, her hands clenched tightly, her eyes red and swollen. A lump formed in my throat immediately. Thomas, we need to talk, she said softly, her voice already cracking. I frowned, setting my keys on the counter. What's going on? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears, and my heart sank. I've done something unforgivable. What are you talking about? I asked, my stomach nodding as a sense of dread filled me. Rebecca inhaled sharply, trying to steady herself, but the tears spilled over. I've been having an affair. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at her, as though she'd spoken in a language I couldn't understand. What? I finally managed to choke out. Yeah, she paused, wiping her tears away but failing miserably. It started months ago. I was weak, Thomas. I was lonely. I felt unappreciated and I made the worst mistake of my life. You've got to be kidding me, I said, my voice rising. You're telling me this now? After months? Why now, Rebecca? She glanced toward the stairs, her face full of guilt. Sophia saw me today. She knows. She confronted me and I couldn't lie to her. So you're only telling me because you got caught? I said, my voice hard. Not because you felt guilty or thought I deserved the truth. Unbelievable. Rebecca sobbed harder, but I was too angry to care. Thomas, I'm so sorry. I love you. I don't want to lose you. Please. I'll do anything. Anything to fix this. Fix this, I repeated, laughing bitterly. You don't fix a marriage by betraying your spouse, Rebecca. You don't fix it by sleeping with someone else. Dad, please stop, came a voice from behind me. I turned to see Sophia standing in the doorway, her eyes red but filled with determination. Mom told you the truth. She knows she messed up. You have to forgive her. Forgive her? I asked, incredulous. Sophia, she didn't confess because she wanted to make things right. She confessed because you caught her. There's a big difference. Maybe, but she's sorry, Sophia insisted, stepping closer. If you don't forgive her, this family will fall apart. Do you really want that? I didn't break this family, Sophia, I said, my voice firm. Your mother did. And I'll tell you something else. Forgiveness isn't something you can demand. It has to be earned. Dad, Sophia said, her voice trembling. If you don't forgive her, I'll leave. I'll run away. I can't live in a house where there's so much hate. Her words stopped me in my tracks. Sophia, don't do this, I said. You don't understand how deep this cuts. Your mother didn't just cheat on me. She destroyed the trust we had. She made vows to me and she broke them. That doesn't just go away because she says she's sorry. Dad, you're being stubborn, Sophia said. People make mistakes. Some mistakes are bigger than others, I replied, my voice tight. And some mistakes show who a person really is. Once a cheater, always a cheater. The weeks following Rebecca's confession were nothing short of hell. The air in the house was thick with tension. Every conversation strained and clipped. I stayed out late most nights, either walking aimlessly or nursing a drink at the bar. Rebecca tried to bridge the gap, but I couldn't look at her without feeling the weight of her betrayal. One night at the bar, as I was nursing my second whiskey, the bartender, Tom, leaned over the counter. Thomas, I don't know if you want to hear this, but you should know. Know what? I asked, already bracing for something bad. It's about Carl, he said, lowering his voice. He's been running his mouth, bragging about banging your wife. The glass in my hand froze midair. What did you say? He's telling anyone who'll listen that he's been, banging Rebecca, Tom said hesitantly. I figured you'd want to know. Rage surged through me like wildfire. My grip on the glass tightened until my knuckles turned white. Thanks for letting me know, Tom, I said. My voice was ice cold. I paid my tab and left, my mind racing. By the time I got home, I'd already made up my mind. Rebecca was in the living room, folding laundry. She looked up as I walked in and immediately sensed something was wrong. What's going on? She asked cautiously. Call Angela, I said flatly, not even looking at her. What? She asked, her brow furrowing. You heard me, I said. Call Carl's wife and set up a meeting. You're going to tell her everything. Her face paled. Thomas, I don't care what you think, I snapped. This is happening. If he's going to run his mouth about sleeping with my wife, then you're going to own up to it, every bit of it. Call her now. Natalie hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes, but she nodded. She reached for her phone and dialed Angela's number. I stood there, arms crossed, listening as the call went through. Hi, Angela, it's Rebecca, she began, her voice trembling. I need to talk to you. It's about Carl. Can you come over tomorrow? It's important. I could hear the confusion in Angela's voice on the other end. Rebecca glanced at me, unsure, but I gestured for her to continue. It's serious, Rebecca said, her voice cracking. Please, just come over. I'll explain everything. After a few moments, Rebecca hung up and looked at me with pleading eyes. She'll be here tomorrow. Good, I said curtly. Get ready to tell her the truth. The next day, Angela arrived just after lunch. She looked concerned but calm as she stepped into the house. I led her into the living room, where Rebecca sat, wringing her hands. What's this about? Angela asked, glancing between us. Rebecca's voice was shaky as she started. Angela, I need to tell you something. I've been involved with Carl. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake, and it should never have happened. Angela's face went through a rapid series of emotions, shock, anger, hurt. You're saying you've been sleeping with my husband? She asked, her voice sharp. Rebecca nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I'm so sorry. It was wrong, and I take full responsibility. Angela stood abruptly, her face a mask of fury. I can't believe this. After everything, you've destroyed my family. I stayed silent, watching as Angela stormed out of the house. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part felt empty. This wasn't about revenge. It was about setting things right, no matter how ugly the process was. The next day, word spread quickly. Angela had filed for divorce and a restraining order against Carl. She wasn't wasting any time. In court, Angela's case was solid. She won the house, custody of their kids, and most of their shared assets. Carl was left with practically nothing and had no choice but to leave town for a new job. It had been 2 months since the disaster broke loose, and while Rebecca and I were under the same roof, the chasm between us was wide and unbridgeable. I stayed in the spare room, avoiding any semblance of intimacy. Rebecca tried small gestures here and there, but I wasn't ready. Trust didn't rebuild itself overnight, and in her case, I wasn't sure it ever would. One evening, as I sat in the living room flipping through the channels, Sophia approached. She hesitated at first, then stood in front of me, blocking my view of the TV. "Dad, can I ask you something?" she said, her voice quiet but firm. I muted the television and looked at her. "What is it, Sophia?" "Why are you still sleeping in the other room?" she asked, her tone tinged with both curiosity and concern. "It's been months. Mom's trying and I thought you were going to give her a chance." I let out a slow breath, leaning back into the couch. "Sophia, this isn't your business." "But it is my business," she shot back, her voice rising. "You and Mom are my family, and I want things to go back to normal." "Normal?" I said, my voice hardening. "Sophia, there is no normal after what your mother did. Trust doesn't just reappear because someone says they are sorry. She betrayed me. She betrayed us. You might think everything's fine because I didn't file for divorce. But things are far from fine." Sophia's eyes glistened with tears. "You're punishing her, Dad. She made a mistake, and she's trying to make up for it." "Why can't you forgive her?" she asked. I stood up, towering over her, my tone sharp and unyielding. "I stayed because you forced me to, Sophia. You didn't want us to divorce, remember? You got what you wanted. Now stay out of it. Go to your room." Her face crumpled, and she ran upstairs in tears. I watched her go, the anger in me simmering but laced with guilt. I hated making her cry, but she needed to understand that this wasn't as simple as saying, "I forgive you." The next day, I met Lucas at a diner we used to frequent. His kids were with him. He was already at the booth, sipping coffee when I arrived. He waved me over, and I slid into the seat across from him. "You look like hell," Lucas said, his mouth twitching into a half-smile. "Thanks," I muttered, signaling the waitress for coffee. Needed that observation. "What's going on, Thomas?" he asked, his tone shifting to concern. "You've been a ghost these past couple of months." I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. "Where do I even start?" "Wherever you need to," Lucas said, his eyes steady on mine. So I did. I told him everything from Sophia catching Rebecca to her forced confession to Sophia's ultimatum that kept me from filing for divorce. Lucas listened, nodding occasionally, but not interrupting. When I finished, I leaned forward, gripping my coffee mug. "She made me promise to stay," I said, shaking my head. "Sophia's got this idea that families can survive anything, that love conquers all, or some crap like that. So here I am, in the same house with a woman I can't trust, trying to keep the peace." Lucas studied me for a moment, then asked, "Why are you really staying, Thomas? Because of Sophia, or because you think there's still something worth saving?" I let out a dry laugh. "Because of Sophia," I said firmly. "She thinks I'm teaching her about forgiveness, about keeping a family together no matter what. But the truth? I'm teaching her a much harder lesson." "What lesson is that?" Lucas asked, his brow furrowed. I stared into my coffee, my voice low but resolute. "Once a cheater, always a cheater." Lucas leaned forward, his elbows on the diner table, his coffee untouched. "So what are you going to do now, Thomas? Just sit in that house and stew?" I shook my head. "No. I'm not the kind of guy who walks blindly into the future. I need to know. Carl might have been the first one Sophia caught, but was he the only one? Or just the last one I found out about? If there's more, I want the truth." Lucas gave me a long look before nodding. "You're asking me to investigate your wife?" "That's exactly what I'm asking," I said, meeting his gaze squarely. "You're my oldest friend. If anyone's going to do this right and keep it quiet, it's you." Lucas let out a sigh, then leaned back in his chair. "All right, I'll take the case, but you know how this goes. If I dig, I might find things you're not ready to hear." "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure," I replied. "I need answers. I can't live in this limbo." He nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. "If I'm going to do this properly, I'll need access to your house. Cameras, audio, I need to see what she's up to when you're not there," Lucas clarified quickly. It took me a moment to reply. "You want to put cameras in my house?" "Only in common areas," Lucas said quickly. "Living room, kitchen, maybe outside if you want. Nothing invasive, but it's the best way to know what's really going on." I thought about it for a moment before nodding. Do it, but I don't want Sophia knowing about this. She's been through enough. Understood, Lucas said. When can my team set it up? Tomorrow, I said firmly. Rebecca and Sophia will be out for the day. Make it happen. The next morning, while Rebecca was out running errands and Sophia was at school, Lucas's team arrived. They worked quickly and efficiently, placing cameras in strategic locations without leaving a trace. By the time they were done, the house looked exactly as it had before, but now it had eyes everywhere. That evening, over dinner, I broke the news to Rebecca and Sophia that I'd be out of town for a few days. I've got a business meeting in the city, I said, casually cutting into my steak. I'll be gone for 3 days. Sophia looked up from her plate. You're leaving? Why now? Work's work, I said with a shrug. You'll be fine. You're practically an adult. She rolled her eyes. Practically. I turned my attention to Rebecca, who was unusually quiet. Rebecca, I assume you can manage things while I'm gone? I asked, trying to gauge her reaction. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. Of course. Good, I said, setting my fork down and leaning back in my chair. Sophia, take care of yourself. Don't stay out too late, and don't invite anyone over without letting me know. Got it, Sophia said, though she looked a little annoyed. I then turned to Rebecca, my tone sharper. And you, try not to spend the time with another lover. Her face turned pale, and the room fell silent. I pushed my chair back, leaving her to sit with the weight of my words. The first morning away, I sat in the sterile conference room of my so-called business trip, my phone vibrating in my pocket. I glanced down. It was Lucas. I excused myself and stepped out into the hallway. Lucas, his voice was heavy on the other end. Thomas, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I've got something you're not going to like. I clenched my jaw. Spit it out. It's not just Carl, he said. My guys found evidence pointing to at least 3 more men. I felt the blood drain from my face. 3 more. At the same time. Yeah, Lucas said. I wish I was wrong, Thomas, but my gut tells me there's even more we don't know. I rubbed my hand down my face, frustration mounting. Do we have names? Not yet, but we are working on it. By evening, I was sitting in my hotel room, trying to process it all when Lucas called again. This time, his tone was sharper, more urgent. Thomas, you're going to want to sit down for this, he said. What now? I asked, bracing myself. She's at your house, Lucas said grimly. With another man. My stomach twisted into a knot. At my house. Yes, Lucas confirmed. My team's cameras caught them going in, and she is playing house. I exhaled slowly, feeling my grip on the phone tighten. They are screwing in my house. Under my roof. That's exactly what's happening, Lucas said. Do you want us to intervene? No, I said, my voice cold and deliberate. Let her dig her own grave, just keep collecting the evidence. For the next 2 days, Lucas's team did just that. Every sordid detail, every damning action, was documented. I stayed updated through periodic calls and texts, each one adding another layer to the anger simmering inside me. By the time I returned, the evidence against Rebecca was overwhelming. I dropped my bags by the door, feeling the weight of the past few days pressing down on me like a storm cloud. The house was silent, Rebecca at her office, Sophia at school. For a brief moment, I allowed myself the hollow relief of being alone, but I had no time to waste. I grabbed my keys and headed straight for Lucas's office. When I walked in, Lucas was already waiting, the expression on his face as somber as I felt beneath my calm exterior. Thomas, he started, motioning for me to sit. We've wrapped things up, and it's not pretty. I sat down, leaning forward. Let's hear it. He handed me a folder. Rebecca's been involved with 3 men we've confirmed, Jacob Carter, her co-worker at the office, Brandon Lewis, a local gym trainer, and Kevin Harris, a mechanic. I let out a dry, humorless laugh, shaking my head. Quite the variety. Damn, she's really doing her part to keep the community satisfied. Lucas smiled faintly, though his eyes stayed serious. Thomas, you might joke, but I know this isn't easy for you. I leaned back in the chair, rubbing my temples. Oh, I'm fuming, Nate. Don't mistake my jokes for anything else, but what's done is done. The marriage was over the day I found out she cheated, I added, my voice quiet but final. Lucas studied me for a moment, then asked cautiously, what do you want to do now? I sighed, leaning forward again. It's not about me anymore. It's about Sophia. She needs to see this, all of it. She wanted me to stay, to forgive, to try again. Fine. I did for her. But this time, if she tries to pull the I'll run away card, I'll open the damn door for her myself. I don't need a daughter who can't use her brain. Lucas raised an eyebrow, clearly weighing his next words. Then he asked with a quiet, deliberate tone, Thomas, is she really your daughter? Lucas's question hit me like a punch to the gut. I froze, the weight of his words sinking in. My mind scrambled, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out if Sophia really wasn't mine. I had spent all these years raising her, loving her, guiding her, and now I had to entertain the thought that she might not be my blood. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the floor. I couldn't bring myself to say anything at first. The silence felt suffocating. Lucas didn't push me. He just waited, letting the question hang in the air. After what felt like an eternity, I finally spoke. All her life, she's called me her father. Even if she's not my biological daughter, I can't force her to stop calling me that. She's mine in every way that counts. But yeah, a DNA test will tell us for sure, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. As for now, I want a divorce. Lucas gave me a nod of understanding, his expression hardening into something more serious. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, dialing a number. Yeah, give me Daniel, he said into the phone. Tell him I need him to meet me and Thomas. It's urgent. I didn't need to ask who Daniel was. Lucas had mentioned him before. Daniel was one of the best divorce lawyers in town, known for winning cases and making sure his clients didn't come out of the process empty-handed. A short while later, I found myself sitting across from Daniel in a small office. Lucas had handed over all the details about Rebecca's affairs and the mess of my marriage, and Daniel was already flipping through the files. I've got everything I need, Daniel said as he leaned back in his chair. We'll start the process immediately. You're going to walk out of this with your dignity intact, Thomas, Daniel added, and we'll make sure you get what you deserve. Lucas's voice cut through the tension in the room. That's right. Thomas is like a brother to me, Daniel. He needs to win this. He should not come out of this a beggar. I walked into the house and the first thing I noticed was that both Rebecca and Sophia were sitting in the living room, clearly waiting for me. Sophia's eyes immediately went to the bags I had left in the living room. Concern written all over her face. Dad, where were you? I saw your bags and I was worried. Are you okay? I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I made my way to the kitchen table and sat down. The file I'd gotten from Lucas was heavy in my hands. It felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on me. But I had to do this. I had to show Sophia the truth. She deserved to know. I motioned for both of them to sit. Sit down, both of you. There's something we need to talk about. Rebecca was already wiping her eyes, her face a mixture of fear and guilt. She probably knew what was coming. Sophia just looked confused, her worry turning to suspicion as she sat across from me. I opened the file and began laying out the pictures one by one, each one worse than the last. Rebecca with Carl. Rebecca with Jacob Carter. Rebecca with Brandon Lewis. Rebecca with Kevin Harris. I let the silence hang heavy in the room as I slid the pictures toward Sophia. She stared at them, her face going pale as she saw the undeniable proof of her mother's betrayal. I didn't say anything at first. Didn't need to. The pictures spoke for themselves. Finally, I broke the silence, my voice cold. These images were taken from videos shot in the last 3 days. Sophia, your mother, she's been seeing these men behind my back, behind our family's back. She never told you about them. She only confessed to Carl because she was caught. She never said anything about the other 3. Rebecca's sobs broke the air, her shoulders shaking, but I didn't spare her a glance. All my attention was on Sophia, who was sitting there frozen. The shock was etched all over her face. She was speechless, her eyes darting from the pictures to her mother, back to the pictures. I could feel the weight of the silence in the room as I spoke, each word heavy with the pain of betrayal. Sophia was crying now, her tears falling silently as she sat there, staring at the pictures in front of her. I didn't want to break her, but I knew this lesson needed to be learned. She had to understand what this kind of betrayal meant. "Sophia," I said, my voice firm but tinged with sadness. "I told you before. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Take this lesson to heart, because this is something you'll carry with you for the rest of your life. Your mother took a path, and it was her choice. I could have forgiven her if it was a forced situation, or if she was assaulted, or under intoxication. But she didn't make those excuses. She decided to cheat. She made a calculated choice and kept herself on that path. And even if I forgave her, I could never trust her again." I paused, my eyes on Sophia as she looked up at me through her tears. "Would you want to live your entire life fearing the day when your spouse will sleep with another man, knowing you can never be sure? That's not a life anyone deserves." I turned my gaze toward Rebecca. Her face was streaked with tears, her hands trembling as she wiped at her eyes. I spoke, the words harsh but necessary. "I don't care why you did it, Rebecca. I don't care how many times you did it, or how many lovers you took in. But for your daughter to get a life lesson out of this, I need to understand. Why did you do it?" I looked at her, waiting for her to answer. I wasn't sure what I expected to hear, but I needed to know. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I needed more out of life. I wanted to be loved by everyone, and I love sex, and one man couldn't give me what I wanted. She said it with such force, like it was some kind of justification. My stomach turned and I could feel the anger building inside of me. I had tried to be civil, tried to listen. But hearing her talk about it so casually, like it was nothing, made my blood boil. I shot back without thinking, the words tumbling out, "Tell me, Rebecca, is Sophia my daughter? Because I don't trust you, and I have to know if she's really my daughter." She froze, her face crumbling as the weight of the question hit her. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she stammered, I don't know. That was the moment I knew everything had changed. I could hear Sophia's footsteps running up the stairs, and I didn't need to look to know she had heard everything. The sound of her door slamming echoed through the house. I stood there for a moment, the heaviness of it all sinking in. My heart was torn between anger and sorrow, but I had to keep going. I couldn't let this go. I walked up to Sophia's room, knocking softly on the door, but I didn't wait for her to answer. I pushed the door open slowly. She was sitting on her bed, tears streaming down her face. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with hurt. "You will always be my daughter," I said, my voice softening as I approached her. I sat beside her on the bed, taking her hands in mine. "Nothing can take that away from me, no matter what." She sniffled, shaking her head, not saying a word. The pain in her eyes broke me, but I had to be strong for both of us. I had to make this clear. "I'm leaving," I said after a moment, my voice steady but strained. "I'm going to my parents' place. I'll be there until the divorce is final. You need time. I need time. We both need time to think." I stood up, the weight of the decision settling in. I walked to the closet and grabbed some of my things, trying not to look at Sophia again, not wanting to see the hurt in her. I didn't know what else to say. I grabbed my bag, took one last look around the house, our house, and walked out. I barely got a second to process the words. The phone call had already thrown me off balance, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. "Mr. Harris, you need to come down to the station. We have arrested your daughter." The voice on the other end of the line said, cold and distant. I asked the question I didn't want to ask. "What happened?" The officer's response was clipped, almost too careful. "It's better you come down to the station." I felt my heart sink into my stomach. Arrested my daughter? What the hell could she have done? I rushed out of the house, adrenaline surging through me as I drove to the station. My mind was racing with every possible scenario. What could Sophia have done? Was she in trouble? Did she get caught up in something she shouldn't have? But nothing in my worst nightmares could have prepared me for what awaited me. On the way, I called Lucas and Daniel, both of whom arrived at the station just as I did. We made our way inside, and I immediately looked for the nearest cop to demand answers. "Why have you arrested my daughter?" I barked, my voice sharp with panic. Before anyone could answer, a tall officer stepped forward, his expression grim. "Mr. Harris, if you'd come with me, we'll explain everything." I followed him without a second thought, my heart pounding in my chest. Lucas and Daniel stayed behind, their faces painted with confusion and concern. I had no idea what was happening, but I needed answers. The officer led me to a small room, the walls barren and cold. He gestured for me to sit, and I did so, not fully understanding what was going on. My mind was still reeling from the shock of hearing that my daughter had been arrested. I opened my mouth to ask again, but he spoke first. "Mr. Harris," he began, his tone heavy. "Your daughter, she has killed your wife." I froze. The world around me seemed to stop, and for a moment, the air left my lungs. "She what?" My voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, as my brain struggled to comprehend. "She what?" The officer didn't flinch. "She's the one who made the 911 call after she committed the crime." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The room seemed to tilt as my vision blurred. My heart raced uncontrollably, and then everything went black. The shock was too much. I passed out. I slowly regained my senses, the haze of shock lifting, but still, nothing felt real. My heart was pounding, and I was gasping for air, trying to wrap my mind around the words I had just heard. My daughter killed my wife. It didn't make sense. It couldn't be true. I finally managed to sit up, my hands shaking as I wiped my face, trying to steady myself. The officer had said she was under psychiatric evaluation. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Psychiatric evaluation. My daughter, my little angel, was now being treated as if she were unstable, a killer. The thought of it, the weight of it, was too much. I had to know more. I had to see her. I looked up at the officer, desperate. "Can I meet my daughter?" I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. The officer didn't hesitate. "She's currently under psychiatric evaluation, Mr. Harris. We believe she is not stable right now. It's part of the process." "Not stable?" I repeated, my voice shaking. My daughter wasn't stable. How could this happen? I felt a wave of nausea hit me, but I forced myself to focus. I needed to understand. Then, the officer spoke again, his words cold and methodical. "When we entered your house, we found your wife in her bed. She had been stabbed multiple times. The officer at the scene reported at least 70 distinct puncture wounds on her body. I felt like the floor dropped out beneath me. 70 stab wounds. Hatred. My mind couldn't connect the dots. This was not the daughter I had raised. This was not the girl I knew. Was it all a lie? Was she always hiding something behind that sweet exterior? The officer paused, his eyes studying me for any signs of emotion, any indication of guilt or knowledge. Then he asked, "Was there something wrong in the family, Mr. Harris?" The question stung. I hesitated for a moment, gathering my thoughts. The truth felt like a heavy weight in my chest. "Yes," I finally admitted, my voice barely a whisper. There was something wrong. We were having problems. My wife, she cheated. And I was planning to file for a divorce. As the words left my mouth, I felt the full weight of the situation come crashing down on me. My wife was dead, and my daughter was the one who had taken her life. All because of the mess that had unraveled in our family. I didn't know what to think anymore. The officer simply nodded and made a note in his file. I couldn't focus on that. I couldn't focus on anything except the haunting image of my daughter, my little girl, now being called a killer. The days felt like weeks as I sat in the silence of my home. The echo of my daughter's screams and the sight of her breakdown haunted me, every moment dragging me deeper into the abyss of regret and confusion. The day Sophia was brought before the court, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the system around me. They decided she needed to be placed in a mental facility, given the evaluator's statement that she acted under immense mental trauma. The court approved it without argument. The DA, who happened to know us personally, didn't even contest it. His daughter was Sophia's classmate. So there was a certain familiarity in the air that made the whole thing feel less official, as though this wasn't just a tragic legal procedure, but something more personal, more devastating. For 28 days, I couldn't see Sophia. And when I was finally allowed to visit her, I wasn't prepared for what happened. As soon as she saw me, she started crying uncontrollably, her face twisted with pain. Before I could even say a word, her body tensed and she collapsed into a seizure. I froze, helpless. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know how. The staff rushed in, and I was quickly escorted out of the room. This happened twice more, each time worse than the last. Every time I tried to be there for her, I felt like I was just causing more harm. It became clear that for now, I wasn't the person she needed. The doctors said I needed to stay away, that more time would be needed for her to heal before any meaningful contact could take place. I left the facility, each step heavier than the last. Now, here I am, sitting in my empty home, staring at the walls, wondering where everything went wrong. I keep asking myself, who caused my daughter to lose her mind? Was it the years of betrayal, my wife's constant affairs, the pain she caused all of us? Or was it me, in some way? Maybe my actions, my failure to protect her from the truth, had led to this breaking point. I had told Sophia time and time again that her mother's cheating was the root of all the pain. But maybe it wasn't just Rebecca who ruined our lives. Maybe, just maybe, I failed her too. I was going to file for a divorce, I thought, and I could feel the guilt twisting in my gut. I was too focused on my own hurt to realize what my daughter needed at the time. Could I have handled things differently? Could I have spared her from this kind of pain? Now, sitting alone in this house with a loaded Glock in one hand and a glass of Jack Daniels in the other, I wonder if I'll ever find the answer. Days blurred into weeks, and I remained trapped in a limbo that had become my life. I had been consumed by the shock, the guilt, and the pain. I had tried to keep a grip on reality, but it slipped away faster than I could hold on. My house, once a place of warmth and laughter, now felt cold and distant. The silence was suffocating. The weight of my daughter's actions hung over me, like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over everything I had known. I kept asking myself the same question over and over: how did it all go wrong? How did we get here? I had failed Sophia. I had failed Rebecca. I had failed myself. The days at the mental facility were long, painful, and lonely. Sophia's treatment had become a blur of appointments, evaluations, and therapy sessions, but the woman who had entered that facility was not the same one who had left my house just weeks before. I could see it in her eyes, the distance, the hurt, the fractured pieces of a broken soul that I couldn't begin to understand. I wanted to help her. I wanted to fix everything, but I couldn't. The one thing I knew for sure was that Sophia had been a product of her environment. The lies, the secrets, the betrayals, they had poisoned her mind, shaping her in ways I hadn't seen until it was too late. But none of it excused what she had done. I couldn't reconcile the image of the girl I raised with the monster that had killed her mother. A part of me wondered if I should have seen the signs. There had been moments, tiny fragments of doubt, that I had ignored. The late-night arguments between Rebecca and me, the distance growing between us, the increasing tension at home. I had turned a blind eye, hoping that things would get better. I had buried my head in the sand, thinking I could shield Sophia from the fallout of our failed marriage, but I was wrong. What had once been a strong, loving relationship had decayed into something unrecognizable. And Sophia, she had borne the brunt of it all. In the stillness of the night, I found myself reflecting on Rebecca's infidelities and the toll they had taken on our family. She had chosen to cheat, and in doing so, she had caused irreparable damage to us all. But I had never expected Sophia to snap. I never imagined that the girl who once ran into my arms with laughter and joy could ever hurt anyone, especially not in such a violent, irreversible way. I was lost in my own thoughts when the phone rang. I stared at the number on the screen, my heart racing. It was the mental facility. "Mr. Harris, this is Dr. Simmons," the voice on the other end said. "I need to speak with you about Sophia." "Is she okay?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. She's been making progress, Dr. Simmons replied carefully. But there's something you need to know. She's asked to see you. She wants to speak with you. I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. The thought of facing her, of confronting what had happened, sent waves of dread through me. But I knew I had to go. I had to see her. I made the drive to the facility, the familiar feeling of dread creeping over me. The parking lot was almost empty when I arrived, and the silence of the place seemed to echo in my mind. I walked into the building, my footsteps heavy on the linoleum floor. Dr. Simmons greeted me at the entrance. Mr. Harris, thank you for coming. Sophia has been asking for you. She's in one of the therapy rooms. I'll take you to her. My hands were clammy as we walked down the sterile hallways, the fluorescent lights flickering above us. My mind was spinning. What could she possibly want to say to me? What did she think she could fix? Dr. Simmons opened the door to the room and motioned for me to go in. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. Sophia was sitting in a chair, her back turned toward me. She was thinner than I remembered, her shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world was too much to bear. She didn't turn around at first, and I couldn't tell if she even knew I was there. Sophia, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She froze and then slowly turned to face me. Her eyes were red from crying and her face was drawn and pale. But the moment she saw me, something shifted in her. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced with a look of uncertainty. I swallowed hard. I've come to see you. Sophia nodded but said nothing. The silence between us was suffocating, and neither of us knew where to begin. I'm sorry, I said after what felt like an eternity. I should have done more. I should have protected you from all of this. She looked down at her hands, the words cutting through her like a blade. It's too late for apologies, Dad. Oh. I don't know how to fix it. I don't even know if I can. I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. Oh no. But I'm here. I'm not going to leave you. Sophia looked up at me then, her eyes filled with a mix of pain and confusion. I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't know who I was. I thought killing her would make everything stop. Make the pain stop. But it didn't. It only made everything worse. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about Rebecca or our marriage anymore. It was about Sophia, my daughter, lost in a storm of rage and hurt that she couldn't control. You didn't deserve any of this, I whispered, my voice cracking. I'm sorry, Sophia. I failed you. She stood up slowly, the weight of what she had done hanging heavy between us. I don't think you failed me, Dad. But I think I failed you. I took a step forward, my heart breaking as I saw the fear in her eyes. You didn't fail me. I wasn't there when you needed me. Sophia took a deep breath, and for the first time since she arrived at the facility, I saw a glimmer of something in her, hope. I want to get better, Dad. I want to fix this. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to try. I want to make things right. I didn't know if it was possible. But I had to believe her. I had to believe that there was still a chance for us to rebuild what was left of our broken family. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe we couldn't change the past, but together we could try to heal. Thanks for watching. Can redemption be found after such loss? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.